forecast for the week of January 20th, 2025. We do the forecast, then we do a little thing about the inauguration, the specific astrology of the inauguration. Here's a spoiler alert. It's an analysis. There's no, great, this is not, keep the hyperbole to a minimum with it. Oh, a little hyperbole is not the end of the world, but thank you all, by the way, those of you, I'm mostly better from my cold. Still coughing at night and stuff, but mostly better. Thank you for your well wishes. I appreciate that. Now, if this was not inauguration week, we would say, wow, this is quite a week, and it is quite a week. Well, first thing is the sun newly entered Aquarius, right? This is the first thing that happens is it meets Pluto. That's going to actually happen on Tuesday. So from Sunday, the 19th, when the sun gets into Aquarius, all the way through Tuesday, when the sun meets with Pluto, and a bit beyond, we have this sort of, well, let's just say power struggles. The sun, being the royal principle, is not really thrilled about being in Aquarius, the sign of the masses, the sign of the people to begin with. Judge as you will. And of course, he has to meet with Pluto. And here we have the question of who really has the power. More on that later. If it wasn't inauguration week, we would have, we would still, and in all the places in the world where there is no inauguration, we still have the sun meeting Pluto. And that dynamic is still there. But it is going to be, it's going to be playing out very directly in the US. Now, and that's happening also too at the last quarter moon. Last quarter moon is in the sign of Scorpio. And if you can look back, about 27 months ago, which, oh gosh, and let me see if I can do this now. If it's early 2025, early 2024, is this early 2020? If you look back to something like late 2022, the new moon in Scorpio in late 2022, this last quarter moon resonates with that time. You can figure that out on the socio-political level. You can figure it out if you have something right around 1, 2, 3 degrees Scorpio, and something began for you back at the Scorpio new moon in 2022, then that would have been in October of 2022. This might be a resonance that you can remember that. That it's the last quarter moon in Scorpio, though, brings us, Scorpio is Pluto's sign, so it brings us right back to that Sun-Pluto meeting on the same day under the auspices of the Sirius Scorpio moon. Now, as we get going in the week, we have a mix-up of aspects between Mars, retrograde Mars in Cancer, right around 23 degrees Cancer, and connecting with Uranus at 23 degrees of Taurus. And then we're going to get into the picture Mercury at 23 degrees of Capricorn. And Venus is going to eventually get in there at 23 degrees of Pisces. And Pallas Athene, yeah, I'm looking over here, Pallas Athene at 23 degrees of, at 20 degrees, I should say, of Capricorn is also sort of in this mix. So, and Pallas Athene being the big truth teller asteroid and so on. And Pallas Athene does, in fact, get out to 23 degrees or close enough to make the, close enough to count. So we got a lot of stuff going on right around 23 degrees. If you have anything at 23 degrees of any sign, this is catching you one way or the other. So if you happen to have something in that ballpark, this is all for you. Among the things that are included here is a nice trine between Venus at 23 degrees Pisces, where she's very happy, and Mars retrograde at 23 degrees Cancer, where he's very unhappy. I'm feeling this as being a little bit of, let's call it a Venus retrograde preview. This could have a lot to do with reconnecting with people that you have been you're not necessarily estranged from, but if things have fizzled out, you may connect there. That would be kind of, I guess, a romantic thing for, something going on. Uh, Other than that, we'll just sort of have to see. I think it would have a lot to do with, socializing, values. The fact that it's Mercury and Uranus connecting, and they're connecting in a very harmonious aspect. Um, and Pallas Athene in Uranus, and even Mars and Uranus are in a nice aspect to each other. There's a fair amount of harmony in all of this. There's a lot of aspects there, but there's a fair amount of harmony. Not all of them are harmonious aspects, but there is. It seems like a time at which the message can get out. I think certainly on a collective level, but I think on a personal level as well, we have pretty good opportunity for getting the message out there, to communicate with friends and significant others and other others. If it's, to be very practical about it, I would say that it's a time to bring things to a conclusion. This is all happening between the last quarter moon and the new moon. It's not like a great time to begin and start up new things, but it could be the time to clear the air about things that have been left unsaid. It could be a very good time to reconnect with that sort of like, yeah, yeah, we should get together more often, that kind of thing. And if you have work projects and so on, it would be good for business agreements that you're trying to bring in for a landing. I know Mars is retrograde and we're going to feel that drag. That's just like the baseline, that hum through the collective. Mars is retrograde. But uh, there's, most things that we would be dealing with at this point in time probably are things that have been in the works for a while. And so, it's possible to bring them for a conclusion. And we're heading towards the new moon. And the new moon isn't until next week, though. We'll save that. We'll save the Aquarius new moon so we have something to talk about when we get there. But the overall vibe of this week, to say it in a word, is we've got some tension and disruption as we start the week, and then you can take that tension and disruption and sort of well, you can talk about it and you can share your feelings and thoughts, and there's a bit of a flow going on once we get past Tuesday. um I wouldn't say that the weekend with the almost new moon is going to be absolutely thrilling. Have the moon, well, the moon will be in Sagittarius for part of the time. That's nice. But I wouldn't say that the waning moon is really great for the weekend, but I mean, it's January. What do you got going on anyway? All right, let's talk about the inauguration. First thing I want to say is the inauguration will happen with the sun in Aquarius. Now, it's an interesting fact that the inauguration day was moved from March, so relatively close to the equinox, was moved from March to January 20th at noon in the early 20th century. Now, January 20th at noon will, by my, well, not very good calculations, but I checked every year between 1929 and 2079, and only three, maybe it's two, only two or three times on January 20th would the sun still be in Capricorn. Right? It's very possible that the sun will not go into Aquarius until sometime around 1:30 or 2:30 in the afternoon on January 20th. But most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, it is going to land with the sun in Aquarius. And those years that the sun was still in Capricorn, they were not inauguration years. Right. So the presidential election, the presidential inauguration in the US will take place with the sun in Aquarius, at least through the better part of the end of this century. You'll excuse me, so 2079. Somebody else can do the math from that point onwards, right? It's got me covered nicely to get out that far. But yeah, the sun is in Aquarius. Now, why is that so significant? Why am I taking up your time with that? Because Aquarius is the sign of the people. It is the sign of the masses. And it is the sign in which the US moon, if you look at the US chart, it's the sign in which the moon can be found. And the moon in the astrological chart of a country always represents the people, the masses. So we're taking the inauguration day where we take, the president, the ostensibly like the solar principle of the US. The U.S. doesn't officially have royalty. We just have we have royalty for 4 years. We like to think that we don't have royalty, but what happened when we got rid of the idea of having an official king or queen is that we wound up with all of these unofficial folks. In my opinion, it doesn't work. Not for the U.S., not for the U.S. It's a whole other thing. But if you look at, let's say, the United Kingdom, if you look at the Netherlands and other countries where they maintain royalty, all of that love and hate and parental projections gets thrown onto royalty, and that allows like the prime minister to be just the just an administrator. They get disliked and they get approval and all of that as well as anybody else, but it's not quite the and in the US right now we've got that whole solar principle. And I think when they put the sun in Aquarius, right, the royal principle in Aquarius, they unconsciously, I suppose, they unconsciously said, well, listen, you're not going to get too big for your britches. This is, we're putting the solar principle in the sign of the stars. We're putting it out there. You're just one among many stars. Aquarius is sort of the star sign. It's associated with the star card in tarot, for example. It's true. It's not maybe the most best argument. Okay, next thing that is up is that the sun is going to meet with Pluto. So the solar principle gets into Aquarius where it's not really allowed to be royal. And the first thing it does is meet with Pluto this time, not previously, but this time around, the first thing the sun does is meet with Pluto. That's when any planet gets into Aquarius lately, that's the first thing they've got to do. They've got to say hi to Pluto. Not a thrill. And there is that sense of, who has the power? And Pluto in Aquarius, as you know, power to the people. It goes in all different directions. It goes in all different directions. And we could really riff on some of the things that are happening in terms of power to the people. Because, one big question is which people? Pluto doesn't care. Pluto will support any masses that happen to show up. So that's not, it's not determinant one way or the other. Pluto's not Republican or Democrat or anything like that. But it certainly does suggest that, the president as the solar principle is answering to the people. And I would think, I've talked about this before. It's like, Donald Trump has won with such great support from his folks. But the truth of the matter is he answers to them, right? He answers to them. He's got to keep them enthused. And that could be a little bit of a trick. The other thing the next thing I would say, not the other thing, the next thing I would point out is that Mars is retrograde. Mars is retrograde in Cancer, which is the sign of the US sun. And it is, just as a general rule of thumb, not a good time to begin a new job. You could make the astrological thing that he's going back to a job he had before. Not so sure about it. The last time a president was inaugurated with Mars retrograde was Bill Clinton's first term. And really, I mean, I think that it was, generally speaking, he had a good 2 terms. There were all kinds of things that went on and stuff like that. But the economy was good. People were pretty happy. I certainly could wax nostalgic about the 90s now, I'll tell you what. Um, but his 2 flagship issues coming in, right, were allowing gays to serve in the military and healthcare reform. Those were the 2 flagship issues. And with the first, as soon as he got in, he hit a compromise with the sort of disastrous don't ask, don't tell policy, which managed to really disappoint the liberal progressive folks and managed to anger the conservative folks who did not want gays in the military. And it was just a kind of, here was the big flagship issue. We're going to make changes. Things are going to be different. And, there were a lot of changes and so on. But on that issue, on that flagship issue, didn't really work. As for healthcare reform, we know very well. Like, the conversation was huge for a couple of years, and we talked about it, and the whole, there was all kinds of stuff going on, but there wasn't really any resolution until, essentially 18 years later with, during Obama's first term with the Affordable Care Act. So you see how this kind of, rallying, here we come kind of energy can kind of fade down. And that is the typical Mars retrograde situation. Now, Donald Trump has Mars at 26 degrees of Leo, which means that he's late for his Mars return. Not really late, but what happens is, because of Mars cycle, it gets extended through one part of the zodiac because of the retrograde. It's a 2-year cycle, but it spends about 6 months in 1 or 2 signs because of the retrograde. And if it happens at the beginning or the middle of your personal 2-year cycle, it's okay. But it's at the end, so he's like waiting for his. It's like you're playing Monopoly, like you're waiting to go around go. And then, but like you just land on the thing, it's like go back 3 spaces. It's well, it's just like that. It's just like that. You need to go around go and get your $200, and you land on chance, and it says to go back 3 spaces. And so you delayed getting your energy packet. And so again, it's like, he's looking to come in gangbusters, obviously, and he might have some trouble with that. I think one of the early signs of this, and and symbolic, and that's what we're really talking about, is symbolism here. But one of the strong symbolic things that we have going on is that the inauguration, because of the extreme cold, is going to be moved inside, which greatly cuts down on the pomp and circumstances. And, well, the pomp circumstances are a different thing. That's just a song. He has, Trump has Mars in Leo, which, I've described it before in other contexts as being like the military parade. It's the look what we've got type of thing. It's the showing up and showing what you've got. And then Mars is very happy at the very last section of Leo as well. And but here we have this retrograde, sort of like, okay, well, we're going to celebrate this, but it's not going to be quite what it would have been. It would not quite the big show that we would have that we were planning for. That's very Mars retrograde. I mean, on the other hand, he does have Mars in a strong position in his natal chart. And we can kind of assume that he can sort of work with whatever changes come around. I don't think he's hurting for energy, Mars return or not. So you can see here in the chart that you have the Sun and Pluto. We would expect the Sun to be essentially at the midheaven because it's just around noon. And it's right up there with Pluto, which, here we have the two most elevated planets in the chart, being the solar principle and the principle of deep transformation. Uranus is rising in the chart, and that suggests a bit of a shakeup and a few surprises. Not necessarily on the day of. It just sort of incorporates that energy into the presidency. The chart is ruled by Venus in Pisces, which is very good, but Venus is caught between Saturn and Neptune out in the 11th house, and we'll have to see, but that doesn't seem to me like such a free-flowing kind of energy, although it is in Pisces where Venus is very happy. Significantly, Eris, the planet of discord, the planet of the cosmic troublemaker, is in the 12th house in Aries. She's been in Aries for like 100 years. That's not a big deal. But she's in the 12th house, sort of hidden, and she is square to the absolute minute, to the minute, with retrograde Mars in Cancer. Right. And so Eris and Mars are well, they're siblings, and Mars is the god of war and cosmic troublemaker. Eris, they're quite a pair, and they're really connecting with each other over here. Eris is in Mars' home sign, which I suppose is okay. But it seems to be seeding some discord, not discourse. It seems to be sowing some discord. And Mars is angular, what we call angular. That is, he's right at the bottom of the chart, right down at that 6 o'clock position, which again, if you don't speak astrologies, it makes it very, it's a very powerful position. As is like the sun at the top of the chart. And um, the moon is in Libra, which actually favors the legislature. And it is in a square to Mercury conjunct Pallas Athene. That is quite a connection. Mercury conjunct Pallas Athene. Again, getting the information out, getting the information to speak what needs to be spoken, right? That is what that suggests. And the moon, well, the moon is square to that. The moon in Libra is sort of saying maybe we can keep the peace, and Mercury and Pallas Athene are saying, oh no, maybe we can't. Anyways, this is the chart, and we will have to see how it plays out. And here we have the US chart. I use the Sibley chart as rectified by Dane Rudyer. And you can argue about the time, but I think that you cannot argue that July 4th is the right day. And Sagittarius really, really works well for the US ascendant. The moon in this chart is on Saturn up in Libra, very close to it at any rate. And that strongly suggests, again, the legislature. It pulls away from the solar power a little bit. Interesting that Mars, transiting retrograde Mars, is right on the US Mercury, which is retrograde. And again, that seems to have something to do with being able to get the message out there, being able to speak what needs to be spoken. And Jupiter in Gemini, which would be the chart ruler of the US, is sitting right on the descendant, retrograding away from it, but sitting right on the descendant. We're also coming up to the US Uranus return, and that would during the next 4 years. we will have the Uranus return. We'll talk about that more in the future, and we talk about Uranus getting into Gemini. But at the first Uranus return, Uranus has a cycle of 84 years. That's a 4 score and 4 years. There was the Civil War. At the second U.S. Uranus return, it was the end of the Second World War, and the U.S. sort of was its status in the world changed significantly. And here we are approaching the third U.S. Uranus return. Well, we'll have to see. The Mars Eris thing and Jupiter on the descendant in a sign that it's not crazy about. It suggests that there's real potential for conflict here. There's real potential for conflict, and it's not a very harmonious configuration, no matter how you slice it. Uh, I think that there is an indication that the president's power is going to be a little bit less than he figures. And I think that that is going to come from a few different sources, among them being his own constituents, who he will need to continually please. Uh, but I think that he will also have a bit of a check from the legislature. And I certainly, and also as well, I think that there's just a general lack of energy that is going to give a little bit of a hesitation and a hiccup. And I think that it might find its way, the response when things are not going absolutely wonderfully is often to find somebody who can be the focus of problems. So we can find the scapegoat kind of thing. Well, we'll have to see. We have to hope for the best. And I'll be back next week after all of this has begun. And we'll just talk about the new moon in Aquarius.